Hello, Luminary. It is Leslie Tagorda with another episode of The Savvy Luminary. And oh my goodness, there are lots of things to share. So I'm going to try to keep it short and sweet. So, this is one of the last episodes of The Savvy Luminary. And no, I'm not canceling the podcast. We are simply going through a name change. I'll share all of the reasons why I'll be changing the name. But really, the reason why I wanted to come on today was to share a story about Chiron, the wounded healer, and Chiron, the transits that, oh my goodness, I am going through right now. And so you might know me through this podcast. You might know me through my email newsletter. You might know me through social media. You might know me through a lot of different places. But one thing you'll notice is that I haven't really been showing up much for most of this year. In the very beginning this year, it really was about a Saturn aspect asking me to kind of like call back, come back a little bit, refocus, be still. And then in the summertime, when I was running Star Powered Summer, I was in Hawaii. And so I just came back from Hawaii again. I'm recording this on October 6th. I was in Hawaii all of July, and then I went back to Hawaii in October. And so my personal life has been really taking over a lot of my work life, even though I've been creating all of these different things. And so yes, 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 I understand. Oh, why is Elsie always going back to Hawaii? She must be so lucky. And yes, I'm very lucky. I realize my privilege in being able to go to Hawaii so often and spend time in paradise. But if you've watched that movie called Descendants with George Clooney, then you know that Hawaii is paradise for many people, and it's just real life for the rest of us. And so I was born and raised in Hawaii, and my mom is still in Hawaii. And over the last few years, since my dad died and my son was born, my mom has needed a lot of care and support, way more care and support than I could give her just by myself. In fact, my mom has actually been unwell since I was 5 years old. And I remember this very, very, very well. When I was 5 years old, my mom hurt her back. And since five, and I'm now 48 years old, she has had like hundreds of hospitalizations and operations, has never ever got back on her feet from hurting her back all of those years ago. And I don't want to like share my mom's story, for like, please do not feel sorry for me. I've made peace with a lot of these different things, and, you know, realize that the relationship that I have with my mom, although it's very, very, very challenging, was such a huge gift because at a very, very young age, like shortly after my mom hurt her back, I realized that happiness was a choice. It wasn't something that came to us, it was something that we actively chose every single day. And that is such a gift for such a young child. I mean, yes, and the opposite end of a young child having to grow up and not having really a safe space. So now where my mom is at, the reason why we went back to Hawaii again was because I got a notification from her caretaker that my mom was going into hospice. Hospice is like preparing for the end of life. And to be honest, I've been waiting for this day for so long. And please don't judge me as cold. This has been all of these ups and downs where my mom has been in the same position on this one single bed since December of 2020, when I rushed back to Hawaii before we had our vaccines in the middle of a pandemic where I was so freaked out to go flying on an airplane. And my mom just had like no concept of what was going on in the real world. And she was asking me to come to her bedside because she was scared. Okay, fine, I went. And so, what I'm saying is that at this point where I went to see my mom again, just these last few days, because we thought she was going into hospice, when hospice went to check on her, they decided that she didn't qualify for hospice, because to qualify for hospice, you need to be within, like, hospice providers have to think that you will be passing in the next 6 months. Now, from my perspective, from my perspective here, with my mom having so many life and death experiences since the time that I was 5, I personally am tapped out emotionally, psychologically, energetically, physically, all of these things from rushing to my mom's side, thinking that each time this is going to be the time and this time it's not. And it's just like, again, this waiting pattern. And even though I've done my work, it nevertheless is so, so, so hard. Now, the reason why I bring this story up is because I am going through the beginnings of my Chiron return. Chiron in astrology is the wounded healer, and I'm going to share a little bit more about why, like what Chiron is and why Chiron is so important in this episode. Um, I'm so grateful to have this astrological insight and to timing into my life because this really helps me grapple with the experiences that I'm going through them, the challenges, the enlightenment, the pain, the hurts, the wounds that I feel, the victimization that I feel, as well as the wounds that I am inflicting upon others unintentionally. Yet that is just how we humans work. And so Chiron takes about 50 years to orbit around the sun and come back to the place at it was at its time of birth, at your time of birth. Um, Usually this happens right around 50 and about a year and a half before and a year and a half after, but just the way the elliptical orbit, for those of us born in February 1974, just like me, we are already experiencing the beginnings of this return of Chiron. And this return of Chiron is like the ending, the bookend of the chain of sequences of your midlife awakening. And of course, the Chiron return is when you are faced fully with the crises that make up your core wounds. And so, of course, this aspect of my mom and her life and death experiences and her like real needs for from me as now as a grown up, but then also putting to light the needs that were placed on me as a little 5-year old are coming back into full amplified magnification. And on top of everything, I have a little boy. His name is Rocket. He is going to be 7 years old. So his first Saturn quarter cycle, where his ego is developing. He is learning how to be himself. He is learning his sense of independence. And my son has some real needs from me. And so, of course, I am human and I'm stuck in between the needs of my mom and the needs of my son. And both of them are complete reflections on the needs that I don't know if I can handle and give. And so I'm looking at all of this through this lens of Chiron. And I'll go in a little bit of depth of Chiron, but Chiron, archetypally speaking, is the wounded healer. And it's not just the victim that Chiron is, receiving all of these wounds as a victim, but there's part of that drama triangle, if you know the drama triangle in psychology, where our Chiron wounds, we actually become the wounder, the perpetrator. And if we can alchemize all of the gifts of Chiron, then we can also become the healer. In the drama triangle, it's the savior, but we're not talking about the savior from like this place of martyrdom, where we can alchemize our gifts of healing in that truest, highest form. And so as I'm going through the beginnings of my Chiron return, which is going to probably last for me for about 4 or 5 years, yay! This has really been pulling me back into taking care and focusing on my mom, focusing on my son, and being in the pain and the challenge of looking at all of my faults and all of my wounds. I'm not saying this to throw me a pity party, because on the other end of that pain and that challenge, and it's not even on other end, there you can think of them as like a DNA helix. They're just interwoven together. You cannot separate this place of challenge and pain with the awakening and the contribution and the gifts, right? We're always looking at like happiness and success as like this thing that may be separate from pain or challenge, and it isn't. They always come together. So I want you to start to notice in your life how the places of the greatest amount of challenge and pain have also been the places of greatest success. And that's what I'm kind of sitting with and grappling and looking to work through. Again, with pain and challenges, it's not to bypass, it's not to avoid, it's not to try to look for that magic pill or go or listen to every single doctor and take all of those operations when your intuition knows better, or putting your happiness and satisfaction outwards, right? This is the whole reason where my mom is exactly where she is today, isolated. She's burned all of her bridges from her friends and her family. She's gone through addiction. She's gone through like hundreds of operations that have left her completely immobile. All because she never really learned how to sit with her pain, instead always bypassing the pain. And that was her gift that she gave to me, because again, when I said at 5 years old that I learned that happiness was a choice, I also learned that pain wasn't something to bypass. It was something to sit with. And yes, when I was in my early 20s, I experienced a lot of things, and I played with a lot of recreational drugs and things like that, partly to avoid, but partly to transcend. And I've come full circle around, coming over that, knowing that that wasn't a place that I wanted to go in terms of addiction or avoiding pain. I wanted to sit with it. I wanted to get curious with it. I wanted to understand what pain wanted to teach me. And so in while I am sitting with the challenges with my son and with my mom, there has been this great outpouring of content and teaching and meaning in my work and in my life that I want to pour back into the world. Hence, at this prime time, I'm not hosting one, but also two Chiron workshops. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. I told you about Chiron and Midlife Awakening that I will be hosting with Nadia Ahrens, where we'll be working on Chiron's time cycles along with the other midlife time cycles and the themes, along with her hypno healing, so that we can remove the crisis from midlife and like really move into the awakening, like I hopefully am. And then, of course, Chiron and wounded leadership, because ultimately the Chiron story is about taking all of our wounds, alchemizing them into wisdom, and then churning it back into this, into society, and contributing this through our leadership and our offers. And so Chiron and Midlife Awakening and Chiron Wounded Leadership are coming up in October, and they are ripe because I am ripe, going fresh, going through these challenges and turning these and alchemizing them into gold to offer back to you. So, who the heck is Chiron? So, really, I wanted to share this story to put everything into perspective and share with you a little bit of who Chiron is as a centaur in mythology, and how we intentionally choose to work with Chiron in our life and in our work, as well as share about these two upcoming Chiron offerings that I have. So, of course, these challenges and the brilliance, these fights and these emotional drains, this creation and the abundance and this deep impact that I'm having with clients, and the direction in my work and my thought leadership, it's all intertwined, right? I don't see them as separate. Do I feel happy? I don't know if happy is the right word, because things are really stressful right now. But do I feel satisfied? Do I feel fulfilled? 100%. I feel fulfilled that I can be present with everything that is going on. So, let's talk about Chiron. So, Chiron in myth and story is a centaur. And there's a few different stories around Chiron's myth around his birth. He is the son of Saturn that took a horse's form and sexually assaulted a sea nymph. Yay, right? All of these Greek mythology and their assault, their sexual assault. But essentially, this sea nymph had a baby, and when the baby came, this baby was half horse and half human. And the first wound of Chiron is that Chiron's mother abandoned Chiron. She did not want a child that was half horse and half human. So I forget, I don't have all the details, and I'll have all the details in my workshop. But Chiron went on, and he was I think he was brought on raised by Zeus. I should know this. I'm sorry. It's all in my notes. It's all messed up. But he was raised by another god who taught him herbalism and botany and astrology and all of these different healing arts. And so Chiron was already such a wonder kid, so to say. And there's a couple of stories how he got his second archetypal wound, which is the wound that he is mostly known for. And so at one point, he was playing with Hydra, the scorpion, Scorpio, Hydra's poison, and to make a poison dart or poison arrow. And this is where the story diverges. I won't go into the differences of the story. I'll share that in the workshops that I have coming up. But essentially, he ends up getting stabbed in his left foot by this poisoned arrow, poisoned dart with Hydra's poison. Now, Scorpio, Hydra's poison, is lethal. He has this lethal, painful wound, but because he's centaur, he's essentially a demigod, he's immortal and can't die, and instead is suffering with this painful wound that cannot heal on his left foot. Okay. Tons of layers of symbolism in there, again, that I'll be sharing in more depth in my upcoming workshops. But essentially, our left side, our feminine side, our foot, our ability to be mobile, the pain that doesn't heal of our foot. You get where I'm going with this, right? And so Chiron then goes on to try to heal his foot. Now, the wounded healer can never actually heal his foot. But in the process of learning all of these different healing modalities and becoming really compassionate and empathetic because of this pain that he has, he can heal others. And so all of these people from all over the world come to Chiron to get initiated into ritual, to become healers, to heal themselves. And Chiron creates all of these beautiful temples. He has his own temple of healing, and he's able to heal everyone else because he's able to alchemize his deepest wounds and turn them into gifts. And so Chiron shares us this story of mind, body, spirit integration. That's why sometimes Chiron, some certain astrologers will associate Chiron to ruling Virgo. Personally, I don't believe that, but we'll be kind of discussing that in some of my workshops. And then also Chiron is related to Scorpio because of Hydra, is related to Sagittarius because Sagittarius is a centaur. There's all of these different symbolisms that come into the Chiron story. And so, the Chiron story and symbolism is so important, not just in our own healing and our own personal development stories, but also how we can put this back into our careers, our vocations, and as an entrepreneur or a change maker into our specific offers that amplify the value and magnetize the people that have suffered the same wounds that we have. And so Chiron is such this beautiful archetype. And not only am I going through my own Chiron transits, but when I open up so many of my clients' charts in their astrobrand readings, I always see Chiron front and center. Chiron aspecting a luminary like the sun or the moon, or Chiron on one of our angles like our midheaven or our rising. This means that Chiron has a really important story in healing in the work of my clients. And so because of all of this, the spirit was just saying, hey, it is time to offer your Chiron teachings and offerings because this Chiron work is needed. Okay, so from an astrological perspective, Chiron is not a planet, not a dwarf planet. It's not even an asteroid. When Chiron was discovered in 1977, and I'm going to come back to why that's so significant about Chiron's discovery, Chiron was at first classified as an asteroid, but as astronomers were working with Chiron, they noticed that Chiron was kind of on its class of its own. In our solar system, there's two asteroid belts. Some astronomers think that these are the descendants of like a planet that just didn't make it. We have two asteroid belts, and Chiron is not in one of these asteroid belts. In fact, Chiron's orbit is so elliptical that it sometimes is within the orbit of Saturn. And Saturn is one of the last inner planets. It's a social planet with like Jupiter and Saturn. So, we have the sun, then we have Mercury, then we have Venus, then we have Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. And so Saturn inwards towards the sun are considered our kind of our main inner planets. Like Saturn is the outward-most inner planet. And then we have Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and so forth, which are the more generational outer planets. And so at certain points in its orbit, Chiron is even closer to the sun than Saturn within Saturn's orbit, and it travels outward past Uranus. And so astronomers created a separate class called the Centaur class. Like, oh my gosh, get this, right? And in mythology, the centaurs, always being half human, half horse, they can go in the underworld, they can come back up to the earth, they can go all these different places, they can cross these different realms, just like this class of centaurs. Chiron, Chariclo, and I think they're Nessus, and I can't remember, Phallus, I think I might be saying that wrong. They are a class of solar system objects that are not asteroids. They are not dwarf planets like Pluto, but they are centaurs that have these very elliptical orbits. Like, how freaking amazing is this? Okay. So Chiron and all of these astrological elements in our sky are named not by astrologers with archetypal knowledge and mythos, but they are named by very logical astronomers, people that study the sky without any kind of symbolism or meaning. And this is so fantastic because Chiron was named Chiron, the wounded healer, from some people, probably some like white dudes, with PhDs in astrophysics, right? And was named Chiron. And because they don't have any of this archetypal know-how or meaning, astrologers, the people with the archetypal insight, take it as this unconscious collective energy that is bursting through, meaning we as a society, as a collective humans, need the archetypal learnings of this energy. So in 1977, what the heck was going on? So prior to 1977, psychotherapists and healers were separating this idea of mind and body. They were two separate things. And only a very few number of healers and psychotherapists were doing somatic healing or integrating mind and body. But it was right around 1977 where the New Age movement really exploded, and psychotherapy was developing into seeing that it was a mind-body balance. And so lots of healers were coming on board, learning how to heal their own wounds, and not having just this like, oh, well, the healer is so perfect, like this certified board doctor, but they were actually real humans, that the best healers were actually the people who have gone through harm and challenges and wounding themselves, because it gives them empathy, it gives them compassion, it gives them different personal experiences that enable healing because they have been there too. And so since 1977, when this Chiron archetype came on board into our collective consciousness, and people knew about Chiron. There's myths written about him ever since like the Greek and the Minoan times, right? But now Chiron has a place in our collective society. And I just think that is so beautiful about Chiron. And I cannot wait to share more in depth meaning about what Chiron represents in our life and in our work. And we can look at Chiron in our natal charts. Now, it's so funny because when I talk about Chiron for my clients, so I can see it in their face. They're like, oh my gosh, this is happening just to me. But what Chiron reminds us is that we all have Chiron in our charts. Each one of us has Chiron in our chart somewhere. And Chiron by sign, and of course, Chiron spends a lot of time in certain signs, and like up to 8 or 9 years in like Pisces and Aries and Gemini and Taurus. And then it reduces its time to about 20 months in other signs. And so Chiron by sign gives us that kind of archetypal energy, meaning what that main question we are trying to heal. Chiron by house gives it even more specificity, like where in our life where did we receive the most wounding that we need to heal. And then Chiron by aspect to other planets shows us the other processes that need to be healed. And then, of course, there's the timing of Chiron, which that Chiron return that I talked about that happens right around age 50, the end of the midlife cycles, is our ultimate way to reach into that spiritual fulfillment by observing and healing and awakening all of those pains and challenges into the gifts that we offer back. So I really hope that you are excited to learn about Chiron, to see how Chiron and interpret Chiron in your chart, to see what sign it is, what house it exists in, what aspect it is, where in your Chiron cycle are you. And if you would like to work with me and your own Chiron healing journey, at the end of the year, I'm offering 2 workshops. Again, Chiron and Midlife Awakening, which is a little bit outside of the box because it's not focused on work. We'll be talking a little bit about work just because work and life are always integrated, but it's not focused on work. Chiron and Midlife Awakening is about healing our different challenges that we experience in our midlife with the different midlife cycles, like the Uranus opposition and the Chiron return. How do we work intentionally with that? Look at our different timelines and the different houses and the themes. And then Nadia Aarons will be joining me with some powerful group hypno healing so that we can talk to our higher selves and really work with our inner child to resolve and awaken some of those core wounds in ourselves. So that's Chiron and Midlife Awakening. And then later on in October, Chiron and Wounded Leadership. And this is definitely a work-focused class, Chiron and Wounded Leadership. We'll be interpreting our Chiron from the core wounds and the themes for which we are searching and seeking healing and answers to. And then we'll be looking at how we are supposed to specify and aim towards integrating all of those core questions into our leadership, into our offers. Because when we integrate the Chiron healing journey into our offers and our leadership, we add value. We call in those people that have experienced similar core wounds, and we magnify our own healing impact with others. It is absolutely amazing. So both of these courses or these workshops, they're intensives because they're pretty intense. We'll be meeting once a week for each of these workshops. And each of these workshops will have opportunities for live conversations with me. The doors are now open to both of these Chiron workshops, Chiron and Midlife Awakening, as well as Chiron and Wounded Leadership. They are separate but designed to work in parallel. So if you are interested, head on over to thesavvyluminary.com/Chiron. Chiron is spelled Chiron, and you'll be able to take a look at these two different offerings. I'm so excited to bring this work through because this work is powerful. I know that we are desiring this work right now, and this is also going to help my personal awakening journey with being able to alchemize the pains and the challenges that I am currently going through, like just like absolutely raw and fresh, into meaningful and impactful work for you. So, my friends, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Chiron, the Wounded Healer, and how we work with it in our lives as well as in our work. This is one of our last episodes of the Savvy Luminary, but do not fear, same content, different name is coming up soon. So if you want to be involved in selecting some of the brand assets for this new brand that's coming forth that we are releasing on October 17th, head on over to my free Facebook or follow me on Instagram. You know how to find me. All right. Well, I'd love to hear how Chiron is showing up for you right now. And I love hearing your stories. We share these stories so that we can heal together. All right, my friends, luminaries, I'll talk to you soon. If you love this podcast, please consider doing me a favor and heading over to Apple iTunes and leaving me a rating and review. Your rating and review helps this humble podcast get seen and found by more listeners like you. Please share the love.